I don't know if you guys, or maybe not crying, but the sound of a baby lamb that's lost or something. They seem to be crying. They seem to be lost, so they're calling out. Which is the only way I can describe that. So it no longer seemed like a baby, but it was more like a baby lamb as I got closer to the noise or to the sound of it. And I remember as I was walking closer and closer, I had pretty good visibility for a really dark night. I mean, the moon was still out. You could see it, and you could also see some of the apartments, or they're not exactly apartments, but kind of duplexes is what I wanted to say. You could see the duplexes that were around in the neighborhood. And so I saw the lights. I mean, I saw the moon was bright, and as I approached the noise, I could clearly see my way around. As I got closer and closer, I started to zero in on the actual noise. And to my surprise, when I got up to, like, let's say 2.5 feet from the noise, it was next to a tree. It was a big tree. And, I could see the roots. I could see the ground. It was moist or wet. And I saw, and I zeroed in exactly where the sound was coming from. And to my surprise, there was nothing there. But there was the sound of a baby sheep or lamb crying, or just, it was the creepiest thing. I remember my skin starting to, get goosebumps, and I was just like, I don't see anything. And I could clearly see the surroundings of the tree. And all of a sudden, the noise started to elevate from the nearby tree, and it started to go up. And it started to elevate, and I could follow, in the middle of the night, I could follow the noise of this sheep or this baby lamb. And what it did is it floated into the trees and then went and floated beyond the trees, and it dove into some nearby fence that was probably, I would say, maybe 500 feet from me. And it disappeared into those trees, into those woods behind that fence. But I remember thinking about what happened. And then afterwards, I went home and I just thought, what just happened? I was a little bit in unbelief. Like, I can't believe that happened the way that it happened. I was expecting to see something. I don't know what I was expecting from the noise, from the sound. I was expecting to see something maybe hurt, to see something that needed help. What was going through my mind afterwards was, in the moment, I'm sorry, how could a little baby be there? And if it was a baby, who was the baby with? What is it doing in a urban neighborhood? Exactly my thoughts. What is it doing there? Who left it there? And when I saw nothing and it floated away into the darkness, I went home in unbelief. I was just like, I can't believe that happened. So anyways, those were my feelings. I told my friend, I called him later on, and I sat down with him and I said, dude, you won't believe what happened to me. And surely, he thought it was crazy too. And till this day, I mean, this happened back in 2012 or 2013, but still to this day, I remember it like it was yesterday. So anyway, that was my creepy story. I will never know what that was, and I thought that was really strange. Never again did I hear anything again after my walks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Orson. While I certainly do not claim to have solved this particular mystery, I may have a logical explanation for what Orson experienced. As I've said no less than probably 1,000,000 times, I'm originally from the southeastern hills of Ohio, and I grew up doing outdoorsy things like fishing and hunting. And it was while doing the latter that I was making my way to my deer stand early one morning. I was probably around 13 years old. and I was told by the older guys that I needed to be in my tree stand before first light. So being the overachiever that I am, I got up at the butt crack of dawn and made my way through a darkened locust patch on my grandparents' property. Now, I was careful not to use a flashlight. I certainly didn't want to spook any sleeping deer. So there I was, trekking through this darkened forest, when I hear an all too familiar sound. A crying baby. Now, absolutely nothing can prepare you for a sound like that in that setting, I can promise you. Even then, at 13 or 14, I was more inquisitive than sensible, so I did a little investigating. I was armed after all, so I doubt a zombie baby would be willing to take me on. So as it turns out, the morning breeze was moving just right to rub two huge maple trees together, causing a whimpering, baby-crying sound that repeated over and over, and even began to change the longer you listened to it. So what I'm proposing here is that with the rainy season, and the recent rain that Orson described, could it have brought with it a stiff enough wind to have caused a couple trees to rub together and creak? Now I should note that 13-year-old me did not have nerves of steel. I just knew the sound, having heard it many times in my years in the woods. That said, it's still a bit terrifying the first few times you hear it. But thanks again, Orson, for taking the time to share your story. Well, that's a Bigfoot and a crying tree out of the way, so let's move on to a haunted asylum. The following was submitted by Zach in wonderful, wild West Virginia.
Hello there, Derek. This is Zach calling from good old Mothman country of West Virginia. Been a big fan of the podcast for, I don't know, a year and a half or so now. I have finally gotten up the nerve to call and tell some stories. As I was listening to your episode a few weeks ago, you were talking about Kirkbride Asylums and how you're a huge fan of those. I actually worked in one for 3 years, give or take. That's now a tourist location / museum / star of television shows and whatnot. Well, my story happened in April of 2012. I was helping out, volunteering on a Saturday night. I wasn't working, so I was just sort of helping out with another group. And I walked upstairs to the second floor, and I ended up running into my friend. And just so happened that at the time, his son was training to be a guide. So we were sort of shadowing him, letting him do this thing, but also trying to keep an eye out to see how he was doing. So we walked down a ward on the second floor, and we ended up seeing some strange shadow movement down at the end of the hallway. So it sort of piques our interest for a few minutes. We stand there and we look at it. And this was really nothing out of the ordinary, but it's always fascinating. Realizing that we should get back and check on his son, we take off down the ward next to us, closer to the center of the building, and we end up running into his son's group. Immediately, hey, did you guys see anything? Did you guys see anything cool happen? So our friend starts talking to them and telling them what we saw. So, as groups always do, hey, take us down there and show us. So we go down to the ward exactly where we were, and he's telling them how it all happened and everything. So we're standing there for a few minutes, and I excuse myself, and I walk about 2 rooms down to the right, which is about 20 feet. And it's a double room. It has the big carved out windows. So I'm sitting against a window, and I'm playing on my phone for a minute. So the group's outside, and I hear them all talking. And I had a tiny little pen light. We didn't use big lights. We didn't want to blind anybody. So I had a tiny pen light on me, and but I hear my friend say, "Hey, Zach, dude, we're going to take off. Where are you?" And they start to all shuffle down the hallway. I don't know, 8, 10 of them. So I turn my pen light on, and I start to walk out of the room. And immediately, the entire group, including my very well-seasoned friend, jump out of their skin. It was nothing scary. I was very subtle with my light. I had shown it out of the room to let them know I was there. I didn't want to scare any group members or my friend. You don't want to scare anybody in front of their group. They're trying to look really professional, and we always were very professional. They all look at me. They're like, "When did you get in that room?" I said, "I don't know, 10 minutes ago. Whenever I left the group, I walked into that room." My friend took his light and he shone it down the hall, and he said, "You weren't down there." I said, "No." "Why?" They all looked at each other completely dumbfounded. "We saw you go into the room down there, probably 100 feet down the hall to the left, which was a bathroom." Then I said, "No, I didn't go in that room." I'm also very distinctive looking. I was about 6'3". I remember the shirt I had on. It was a favorite shirt. It was a black and white plaid flannel shirt. And it would pick up very well. The white of the flannel would pick up very well in the flashlight. And they were completely shocked that I had not walked in that room. And I said, "In fact, I don't walk down this hallway because a few weeks earlier, I had a group up there, and we heard a noise, a little bit of shuffling, so we go to investigate it. It turns out some pigeons had broken in through a window, and they were roosting in this bathroom. That was the night that I found out that I'm allergic to bird dander. So, I don't hurt the pigeons, so we excuse ourselves from the ward and go down to the break room, laugh about the pigeons. My nose starts to run, my throat starts to shut up, and so from that point on, I didn't go down that hallway anymore. So, but it was really weird the way things would happen. That they all swore that they saw me, but also that's the way things sort of happened there. You would see something that didn't look out of the ordinary. You would see somebody standing there, and you turn your head back, and there's no one there, or you would hear your name whispered in your ear, and nobody would be there. We worked there, and we didn't just work there to be idiots and to just garner stories. We worked there enough to where we would actually investigate with the groups. We would investigate on our own to get stories, and we would attempt to debunk every single thing that happened. But there was nobody else in the group that night that had a shirt on like I did. Probably, if there was, there wouldn't have been my height. So, yeah, just chalk it up to people seeing your doppelganger at the end of a hallway. Anyway, I have a good bit of more stories from there. Obviously, I worked here 3 years, so I have quite a bit of strange stories. I will definitely call back. All right. Thank you, man. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Zach. I do have a bit of a strange fascination with these Kirkbride buildings. I love all things Victorian era, so maybe it stems from that. Or perhaps it's all those early ghost shows like Spookiest or Scariest Places on Earth, whichever is the correct title there. MTV's Fear and of course a show that was recently announced to be rebooted, Ghost Hunters. Now all three of those shows actually visited the asylum that Zach's story takes place in. At least, that's if my process of elimination is correct. So thanks again, Zach, for taking the time to share that. Now before we play the back nine, I need to get through a few of these announcements. The Brett Manning shirts are in the store, and there's a little bit of a spin on these. I wanted to do something different for the first run, so I put together a little doodle, a little bug that I draw on each of the boxes I send out, and I actually applied that to the shirt. So the first 56 shirts have this little bug on it. So if it's something you'd like to pick up, head on over to monstersamonguspodcast.com and click on the shop tab. And I am sold out now in a couple sizes, So if you're waiting for those, I am putting a new order in next week, but the new ones will not have that little bug. That is a limited edition feature. If you like paranormal documentaries, I highly recommend you check out Terror in the Skies by the Small Town Monsters crew. Now, you can find that documentary on Amazon, though it is not streaming for free. But for those of you that do tune in and check that show out, you may recognize a handful of calls that are played over some images early on in the film. I donated a couple stories to Seth and the gang to kind of set the scene for this film, and I gotta tell you, it's pretty interesting. So if you're into thunderbirds and spooky things in the sky, that's the documentary for you. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone involved with AlienCon and the meetup afterward. Also, a big thanks to the folks that stuck around the chat, especially Ray, Joanne, Sarah, Jess, Paulo, Amber, and Mariah. I had a great time meeting and greeting everyone, and the panel was a smashing success. And the last order of business for the evening, Season 8's coming up, and I am looking to make a couple small changes around here, starting with the theme song. Now, I absolutely love the theme to the show, but I would like to put my own spin on it, so I'm asking for your help. Is there anyone out there listening that may have some experience in rewriting or writing music? Essentially, I'm looking to keep the theme I have, but I would love to change the arrangement and some of the instruments. So if that's something you think you can help me with, shoot me an email at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. And on that note, let's move on with the show. And let's kick off the back half with one of my favorite cryptid subjects. The following is Gabe's call from the state of New York.
Hi, Derek. My name's Gabe. I live in the suburbs of New York, Hudson Valley region. I just listened to Candy's recount of her seeing a Black Panther, and I just wanted to tell you what my brother saw, and I thought it was pretty interesting and relevant. And also my best friend's sister, she was riding horses in the trails in Chappaqua. This was in the late 80s. And what she saw was, she said her horse was going along the trail and it stopped and wouldn't go any further. And she was trying to get the horse to go forward, and she didn't understand why the horse had stopped. And then she looked in the branches of the tree ahead of them, and she saw a Black Panther in the branches. And she went through the same thing. She was told it was a bobcat, but it absolutely was too big to be a bobcat, and it was a black mountain lion-sized creature. Then, that was when I was a teenager. Then, like 10 years later, in the mid to late 90s, my brother is a garbage man. He drives a sanitation truck. And he said he was driving, I want to say he was in Chappaqua, or he was in Westchester, a close by town nearby there, driving his truck through a suburban town, suburbs, not even in the sticks, but he was driving the truck and he had a helper, an Albanian guy, riding with him. The guy couldn't speak very good English that he was with. But he said he was driving his truck and it darted right out across the road and paused right in front of his truck, and then he said it was definitely a big Black Panther, black, and broad daylight. He saw it, and he said it was very smooth, and it just ran off into the woods as quick as it had appeared. And he said, my brother said he turned to the helper, and he said, "Did you just see what I just saw?" And the guy said, "Yeah, we better not tell anybody. They'll think we're crazy." But they did see that. What happened with me and my brother when we were kids, we grew up next to Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers. It's a seminary where they train priests, and across the street from there's the sisters where they train the nuns. It's a nun place where they live. We used to ride our bikes up there, and there was a bunch of stray cats that lived on the grounds of the sisters. and we were chasing the cats, and one day they ran into this like abandoned barn that's on their property, and we were going to go into that barn and chase the cats, hoping to get like a kitten or something like that. But when we got off our bikes and ran up to the barn, we were going to climb underneath the barn doors because there was a nice gap. But on the other side, when we pounded on the door, and I was getting ready to climb under it, but we heard like a loud rumble, like that loud rumble of a cat, like a big cat. It wasn't a little kitty cat. It was like a large cat in there. I don't know if they had a speaker set up to scare off kids, but it definitely worked if that's what they had. But I really doubt they had that. I mean, because you're talking, when we did this, it had to be in the mid to late 80s. But that's what happened. We did hear that. It scared the hell out of us, and we hightailed it out of there. But that's my recount of that. But love your show, and have a great night.
Thanks, Gabe. I often talk about alien big cats, also known as ABCs. I talk about sightings here in the States, but you might be surprised to know that the UK and Australia both seem to be experiencing the exact same phenomenon. Big cat-sized felines, usually all black, found in places where these, although extremely rare naturally occurring animals, otherwise never existed. As a witness of one of these creatures myself, I can tell you that whatever it is, it's something out of the ordinary. Thank you again, Gabe, for sharing your story. All right, it's time for the main course of the evening. Something you can really sink your teeth into. The following was submitted anonymously from the state of North Dakota.
Hi, I'm from northeastern North Dakota. Grew up on a farm. Still work on the farm a little bit here and there, but this story happened to me, around 2009, late in the fall. It was probably early November. All harvest was done. We were working the fields, and I mean, this is pretty bare land up here. There's not a lot of farms close together. It's pretty desolate out here. It's nothing but just fields and a few shelter belts. But anyway, I was 2009, I was probably 28, 29. And, Dad had me out late working a field for the fall. And there was a certain field that we rented that the owners wanted it worked. So we had to work late. And I worked a full-time job somewhere else at this time, so I didn't get out there till evening, and it was already getting dark. Up in this area, it gets dark kind of early in the fall through the winter. But, it was kind of cloudy and kind of misted in the morning. But anyway, when I got out there, it was just cloudy and kind of dark. And so I'm working the field, and it got to be about midnight, and I had half the field worked, and I had to work the other half because the landowner wanted it worked before everything froze up and blah, blah, blah. But so my dad brought me fuel about midnight, and he said, "Here, I'll leave the dog with you, keep you company." So on this certain particular ground, it's all open on three sides except for the east side, close to the river, is kind of woods. And, I was working the field, and as I got closer to the trees, the dog her hair stood up on the back of her neck, and she started growling every time I got to a certain point in the trees. And I got this, when I got closer to the trees, I don't know if it was just fatigue and it was late and I was freaking myself out, but I started getting the chills, like just a really eerie, freaky feeling. And it was dark. It was pitch black out. It was cloudy and cold, and it was, well after midnight when I got the groundwork close to the trees. But so I'm going along the trees with the tractor and chisel plow, and at a certain point the dog just started freaking out, and she was jumping up and barking and snapping and growling and just acting way out of character. So I stopped, and I thought maybe she had to use the bathroom, so I let her out. She jumped off the tractor. As soon as I opened the door, she jumped out of the tractor, hit the ground, ran straight for the shelter belt, which was about, at that time, I was, 30 feet away. And she ran up to the point of the certain point in the shelter belt, just stopped dead. It didn't make a sound, just stared into the trees. And I thought, what the hell is going on with this dog, you know? So I went over there to grab her and like, come on, get back in the tractor. We still got to finish this field up tonight, and I'm tired and I want to go home. So I picked the dog up and she snapped at me and growled, and I looked in the trees and I saw these red eyes. Just red circular eyes, and that's all I saw. And they were, it seemed like they were staring right at me, like almost through me. And I just got this really scared, eerie feeling. I grabbed the dog, ran back to the tractor, slammed the door in the tractor, and, you know, just kind of shook it off and said, oh, it must just be a deer or something, you know, or some type of wildlife up here. Nothing to worry about. And that dog kept, every time we got to that certain spot where them red eyes were, she would just start freaking out. So anyway, I got the field worked, and I was on my way home, and it was about 4 miles from the field on the gravel, and like I said, it's pretty desolate up in the Red River Valley in North Dakota, especially way up north. And was going, and, well, this part still scares me, but it's what it is, I guess. But I was bringing the tractor home, and I was about 2 miles from the yard, and there was an outline of this figure, and the dog started freaking out again, which I said, this is way out of character for her, because she was so nice and never hardly ever barked. And so, you know, I was still kind of freaked out about those red eyes I saw in the trees and whatever. So I just kind of tried pushing it out of my mind. And whatever this figure was, it was an outline of a man, like probably 6 feet tall, all black, almost like a shadow. But the rounded head, it looked like it was dressed all in black with a black hooded sweatshirt up over its face, you know. And it acknowledged me. Figure scooted over to the side of the road, kind of almost in the ditch, and I just pulled the tractor over on the gravel road and went by it. And I thought, well, I better stop, because a lot of people take those back roads by our farm there, you know, to jump from bar to bar, and you get these people that hit ditches in the middle of the night, you know. And at this time, it was about close to 3 a.m. So I thought, well, geez, I better stop in case they need help. But they didn't flag me down, which I thought about that before I got out of the tractor, but I thought, no, I'll be nice and stop and see. So I stopped the tractor, and the dog's growling. And that kind of freaked me out, that the dog was growling. And I got out of the tractor, and I looked at the figure. It stopped moving and turned around. And I hollered at him, hey, you need help? Are you stuck or whatever? And there was no response. So I walked a little closer. I didn't get out of the range of the lights on the tractor. And I hollered at it again, and the dog came running out of the tractor and ran up next to me and just stopped dead. And I knew that I got that freaky feeling again, and the head of this person or whatever it was lifted up, and all I could see was red eyes, like what I saw in the trees, and it had like a white grin, like almost like its teeth were just white as could be, and sharp. I don't know how to explain it other than like a big, like a bear or a cat, or like a big predator cat, or I don't know. But it was the outline of a human. I mean, probably a 6 foot tall, maybe a little taller man. And I ran back to the tractor. I got the dog on the tractor and ran her home, went inside, and, I was freaked out. I had all the lights on. I parked the tractor right next to the house and ran inside with the dog, and the dog was running from window to window, from the living room window up into the dining room, into the little kitchen area, looking out the sliding glass at our dike, and back into the living room, looking into the trees, and finally got her calmed down. And I finally got calmed down enough, at least where I could sleep for a few hours. And Dad grabbed me in the morning and kind of woke me up, and he said, "What was all the commotion last night when you came home?" And I told him, and he thought I was crazy. And then about 2 weeks later, our neighbor was over at our shop. We were working in the shop, and he was talking about some lights that he saw in the field. So we were talking, and of course my dad thought we were both kind of nuts, and I started telling him about the figure that I saw. And before I could finish explaining what I saw, he said, "Did it have like red eyes, outline of a man, and like these sharp teeth?" And I said, "Yeah." And all he said was, "Oh, that thing's back." And so I just said, "Well, is this something I should know about? Like, has this creature, whatever it's been haunting or harassing his area?" Because I never saw it as a kid, never got that feeling in my life until that day. And I have never seen it again from being out on the farm or out in the field or what at night. I have never seen that again, but there's a few people around that area in the North Red River Valley that have said they've seen that. Thanks for listening.
And that is where the call cut off. But a huge thank you to that caller for submitting. Now, our caller really does a good job of painting the picture here, and the dog was used perfectly to amp up the suspense. Well told, sir. Well told. Now, it's almost something like Field of Dreams meets Jeepers Creepers, and I love it. Now, I'll be honest with you, though. I'm having a hard time with the description. Is this a shadow entity or something biological? I'm leaning towards flesh and blood, I guess. But to be honest, none of that really even matters. Because spectral or not, we have no idea what this thing is. Now, it has traits of the Shadow Man phenomena, but also anything with glowing red eyes. But yet its behavior is more akin to, I'd say, the Dogman or behavior of some skinwalker type creatures that's been reported over the years. I don't seem to know much about this call, but I do know this. I bet many of you will be scanning the shadows this evening, eyes wide open for that red glimmer and that mouthful of sharp teeth. Thank you again, caller, for sharing that terrifying story. And please let us know if you see anything like that again, or I guess if anyone else out there has seen anything terrifying like this. If so, you can report your story by calling the hotline at 1-888-608-NIGHT. That's 1-888-608-6444. Now, you leave your story in the form of a voicemail. You have a 5-minute window. If you need more time, simply call back and pick up where you left off. I'll splice it all together for you. Oh, and Friday the 28th of June will be the last day you can submit your hometown legend and be eligible for the Season 7 finale. You can still submit, I'll just push forward to the Season 8 finale. And that's going to do it for this episode. Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Additional support is provided by Addie Lloyd, Warren Pond Abbott, and Tony Bell. The amazing music you hear is from the talented Coag Music. Thank you all for listening, and until next week. Well, just like the Denver International Airport, Monsters Among Us, too, has its secrets. And you just stumbled upon one of them. Now, tonight's secret story comes to us from the state of Utah and was submitted anonymously. Hi. My story happened in Salt Lake City, Utah around April 4th or 5th of 2019. It was around 7 or 7:30 as it was just getting dark. It was partly cloudy, a little breezy, and bright outside. On the weekends, I go on bike rides, and I bring my phone and earbuds. I was biking to a park close by. It's a pretty flat ride after going up a hill to get to the trail that's almost right under the mountain in the area. I felt a little weird that day, but I didn't care at the time. My phone was acting normal, nothing different or weird. And also keep in mind that my phone case didn't have anything that would be independently pressing buttons on the phone or on the sides. It was even a little difficult for me to press the buttons while it was in the case. Well, after arriving at the park, I did a couple laps, messed around, and then had to take a break because I was tired after all that. As I was resting, I was just looking around at the scenery, as it was quite pretty. There's some hills and some trees in the surrounding park. There are probably around 40 or so trees to add to the scenery. I looked up, and in one of the trees with the sparse leaves, I saw a black oval, kind of shaped like an egg. I guess it was a thing. It was just up in this tree, not moving. It didn't look like it was swaying side to side or going up and down with the wind or anything like that. It didn't have any limbs that I could see, no legs or arms or even a head. It looked like it was almost perched on one of the branches, but after moving to get a better view of the thing I saw, it was just floating in the air, not touching anything. At this point, I was pretty freaked out. When I saw that it was floating, I decided to head home, because I was freaked out. It was a warmish day, which in Utah means anything above 50 degrees. However, as I started to head home, I felt chilly and cold. It could have been because the day was ending, but it felt like maybe I was connected to the black oval. Anyway, once I left the park, my phone started acting weird. I had been listening to a video and the volume started changing rapidly, going up and down. Then the video I was watching kept changing to different videos. I had just enough time to see the titles of the video and it kept saying stuff like, "I loved you," "You broke my heart," "I forgive you," and stuff like that. The last video it played was a song called Ghost. It played that one all the way through. Once it was over, I had almost reached home. As I was walking my bike, I looked up and saw that the lights in the house I was passing began to flicker. The weird thing is, it was only happening to houses I walked in front of, and once I walked past the house, the lights would just be fine. I finally got back home and my phone started acting weird again, and it eventually died, so I left it alone to charge. The next days, there were no issues with it at all. This isn't my first supernatural encounter, so to speak. I've seen shadows of people walking around the house at night when I was the only one awake. I heard things in the house, etc. There are two things I see most commonly outside of the house, though. A black cat out of the corner of my eye, and a white wolf, which I can see more directly. Those things have been so commonplace with me that it's quote-unquote natural for me to see them. But this black oval thing is something new, which I hope I never see again. Well, thank you for submitting that story, and there's a good deal to unpack here. As far as the UFO is concerned, it certainly sounded like a helium-filled balloon or maybe a resting bird at first. Having something small and round perched in a tree isn't all that weird. But floating in the air, that's a completely different situation. I know the state of Utah has its fair share of UFO encounters, with the Skinwalker Ranch being nearby and all. So perhaps this is just another to add to the list. Thank you again for taking the time to share, and thank you for sticking around to the end of the program. Have a great night. Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. Welcome to yet another installment. Now, I realize with all the TV shows and upcoming conference talks and stuff like that, there's a lot of new listeners tuning into the show. So I thought I'd take a quick second to kind of introduce the show to those new listeners and kind of give a brush up for those that have been listening for quite a while. My name is Derek Hayes, and this is Monsters Among Us, and we're about to take you on a ride. Each week, this show features 6 to 10 authentic, listener-submitted stories with subjects ranging from Bigfoot, aliens, to ghosts, doppelgangers, and UFOs. Now, to the best of my knowledge, each and every call that I play is true and genuine. So, that is Monsters Among Us in a nutshell. And without further ado, let's demonstrate a little of how it works right now. Our first call of the evening comes to us from my state of California. The following was submitted by David.
Hello, my name is David. I'm from Orange County, California, and I have a story that happened about 6 or 7 years ago. It's about some sewer spirits. Anyways, I have 2 stories about something I saw and heard in a particular park in Orange County. This park always had kind of a creepy feeling to it, especially at night, and me and my group of friends would just hang out down there because we were bored, we were broke, we didn't really have anything else to do. Anyways, this park has a lot of trees in it, and it also has a large, storm drain tunnel. It's not really a sewer, it's more of a storm drain tunnel. And it's really large, and a full-size adult can walk inside of it. We used to just go in there, kind of explore, look around, just hang out. It was really hot outside, so we just go in there, and it was cooler in there. Anyways, so one day it was daytime. We were walking down to this tunnel, and I saw these 2 little kids on the edge of this creek that would lead into this big tunnel. It was like a boy and a girl, and they were just hunched over, looking into the river. They were about 20 feet away from me, I'd say. Anyways, so I turned around. They caught my eye, and I just turned around, thought they were just kids, and then I looked back, and they weren't even there, and they just disappeared, just vanished. And that was just really strange. I asked my friend, do you see those kids? And he said, yeah, I did. I'm I don't know what happened to them. I'm that was weird. We just brushed it off. So anyways, we just kept visiting this park over the summer months. And one time we went inside this tunnel, and I had this little app on my phone. It's called Ghost Radar. I think it's still out there. Still probably on the app market. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's just a little radar, and it's just a toy, and it'll show you a red orb or a green orb that might be close to you. And then, supposedly ghosts can use your phone to generate a word at a time in order to speak to you. So I thought it'd be funny, and we just loaded it up, and we started asking questions. And one question was what's your name? And it said Ray. And we all just kind of looked at each other wow, that's pretty weird. So anyways, we kept asking the same questions, and we said, why are you here? Where did you come from? And it, one word at a time, it said mission, and then it said ranch, and then that was it. And we're oh, okay, that's kind of weird. And we made a connection because, Southern California, most of California is known for our missions, the Catholic missions. And Orange County in particular had a lot of haciendas and ranches in the 1800s and late 1900s. So that was pretty weird. It could have been a coincidence, and maybe we just made that connection, and that kind of freaked us out. But anyways, we kept asking questions. It didn't say anything. And then a couple minutes later, it said storm and then run. And so that freaked us out. So we decided, all right, let's get out of here. So we started walking out of the tunnel. And now it's starting to be around 5 o'clock. It's getting dark. So we're heading out of the tunnel. We've been in there for probably about an hour. And so we're heading out. And as we're walking out, I hear a really loud whisper in my ear that said, "Hey." And I turned around and looked at my two friends behind me and said, "Did you guys say anything?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Did you hear that?" And one of my friends said, "Yeah, I just heard it." And I was like, "What did you hear?" And he said, "Hey." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I heard too." So now we're really freaked out. So we run out of the tunnel, and we're making the walk back to the entrance of the park. And when we're walking, it starts to rain. And so again, that we get a little freaked out. We're like, "Oh, the app told us it was going to rain, and the storm, and to run, and now it's raining." And we're like a little freaked out about that. And so yeah, we left, and we went back down there, and never had really anything else happen. And yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting, weird story, and I forgot all about it until recently. Unfortunately, a body of a young girl was found in that park, and she committed suicide. And then it was on the news, the local news, and then all these memories kind of came back to me. Anyways, I just wanted to say again that when both of these incidents happened, we weren't under the influence of any drugs or alcohol or anything like that. We were completely stone cold sober. And yeah, it's just weird, interesting story I thought I'd share. Again, thank you for your show. I always enjoy listening to it at work. Thanks for your time. All right, bye.
Thank you, David. Now, coincidentally, I also heard a disembodied voice once say, "Hey." This happened shortly after Sarah and I moved into our first apartment together. I had just woken up and was laying in bed, trying to muster up the courage to get up. And clear as day, next to my side of the bed, I heard a voice abruptly say, "Hi." And oddly enough, there was no other odd activity that we experienced in that apartment, other than astronomically high rent and terrible neighbors. Thank you again, David, for taking the time to share your story. Moving right along here, we're going to head up to the state of Idaho. The following was submitted by Katie.
Hi, my name's Katie. I live in Idaho. I'm originally from Michigan, and that's where this story actually takes place. I was 11 years old, and I just talked to my brother about this to make sure that he remembered it without telling him what I was getting at. So here it goes. We lived in this place called Elma in this nice trailer in a nicer trailer park, and there was nothing really weird about it. We saw it when we moved in. We lived there for about a year before some odd things started happening. I had the big bedroom down near the end, and my brother had one slightly down the hall, and between us was the linen closet and the bathroom. Now, a few nights I would wake up, no particular reason I thought, I would wake up and I would hear the linen closet door open and slam. And I thought it was my brother. But then I realized that right after that, I heard his door creak open because our parents made us sleep with the doors closed in case of a fire. I heard his door creak open, and then I heard him run down the hall. And he came into my room, flipped on the light, and he was all pale and sweaty. And he looked at me, he's like, "Katie, was that you?" And I lied. I said, "Yeah, Nick, it was me. Come on, you can sleep in my bottom bunk." And so he did. That happened. I don't know how many times that happened, but it was regular enough that my mom wondered why my brother was sleeping in my bedroom. A few other weird things happened in the house, like my mom and I would be doing chores in the kitchen. I'd be doing the dishes, she'd be sleeping, and a cup flew across the room. The windows weren't open, neither of us had touched it. It had been sitting on the table, and I just remember it was green. I remember it just flying across the room. My mom and I looked at each other, kind of giggled nervously, and just went back to what we were doing. This is also the house where I sleptwalked a lot. And if it had just been me, I'd have been like, well, maybe it was just my imagination. When I sleptwalk, I would deliberately open the front door, just the front door. I would unlock it and open it. And then I would go back to bed, and I didn't remember doing it. And one night my mom stayed up, and she saw me do it. Just open the door. And I remember dreaming about doors, but, kids who sleepwalk, they don't remember doing it. She woke me up, and after she woke me up, I never sleptwalk again. Strange things kept happening in that house. until we moved out a few years later. Nothing bad. Nobody got any strange bruises or anything, but just these things opening where they shouldn't, slamming, moving. Anyway, love the podcast, and I look forward to listening to more episodes too. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. You said something interesting there, talking about the sleepwalking. Now, this is something that I've never thought of and obviously never put two and two together. But you'd mentioned that the only time you've ever done any sleepwalking was while you lived in this potentially haunted house. That has me wondering if there's a correlation there. Now, this is simply me spitballing here, but could sleepwalking somehow be influenced by a spirit or influenced by an entity? I don't really have any evidence or even anecdotal evidence to support this other than what Katie has said here in her call, but it is something that's certainly triggered some interest in me. I'm going to do a bit of research, and if any of the listeners out there actually know of any correlation between sleepwalking and paranormal activity, please shoot me an email, let me know. Now, there may be absolutely nothing to this, but the other side of the coin, we may have just uncovered something. And thank you again, Katie, for taking the time to share that inspirational call. So what do you say we change things up a bit here? Let's move on from the ghosts and ghouls. Maybe investigate a little spookalite action. The following story comes to us from Frankie in the state of New Hampshire.
Hi, Derek. This is Frankie. I'm calling from New Hampshire. I have a story that happened back in the mid-'80s, probably around '86. This happened where I grew up in upstate New York. It was a summer day. It was a bright day. I remember that. And we were at my cousin's house, the family was, and there was kind of a backyard barbecue hangout thing going on. And everyone was behind the house. And I happened to be, for some reason, alone on the side of the house doing whatever I was doing, just walking around or whatever. And I happened to, when I looked up, I saw this light, which was strange because it was such a bright sunny day, but this light was very bright and it was moving. It was headed directly at me. I'd never seen anything like this before. The best way to describe it is it was a cylinder, probably I would guess about 2 feet in length and maybe 6 inches, cylinder shape. And it was moving at a pretty good speed, parallel with the ground, probably about 4 feet off the ground, and headed directly at me. I didn't even have time to think about moving or anything. I was just, what is this thing? And it came at me, went kind of beside me, like it was a foot away that it passed me. And by the time I turned around, it must have already gone into the woods because there was woods behind the house. And I tried to figure out what that was. It didn't make any noise. I didn't feel anything when it went by me, but it was, and as it traveled also, it was flipping end to end, like spinning as it traveled, very parallel, very straight, like it had a direct path. So I didn't say anything to anybody because I couldn't figure out what I had seen, and I didn't think they would believe me. I was a teenager at the time, and so I kind of, just thought about it for a while and kind of went on my way. And come to find out, I'd moved away later as I got older, and about 10 years later, I had gone home to upstate New York again to visit family, and I was having dinner with brother and his wife, and we were just chatting about things, and they told me, we've got to tell you something that happened to us recently. I said, what was that? And they said, we were driving home at night, and the roads up there, it's not very heavily populated. A back road, trees on both sides, there's no streetlights or anything. And they said they were driving home, and they saw coming from the other direction this light. And they said it was moving pretty fast, and they thought it was a motorcycle because it was a single light. And as that got closer, they could see that it was spinning, and they went on to describe exactly what I had seen. And they said it came directly at them and went like right over top of their car and kept going. And they described it exactly as I remembered what I had seen. And I told them that, and, it had been 10 years since my experience, and none of us, the three of us, could even begin to figure out what it could have been. But I thought it was interesting that it was in the same general area. So if you have any ideas, or if there's anybody listening that might know what that could be or has seen something similar, I'd really like to hear it. So thanks a lot. I hope you are interested in that story. I just started listening to your podcast. I really like it. I hope to hear more interesting stuff. Have a great one. Bye.
Thank you, Frankie. Now, this story reminds me of a tall tale, we'll call it, that I remember reading about in college. You see, I went to school in Northwest Ohio. And for those of you that live in Ohio or from Ohio and have interest in the paranormal, you may be aware of a book series known as Haunted Ohio. Essentially, it's a 3-book series, I believe it's 3 books, full of short stories from around the state. And I remember being in college, new to the area, as I grew up in southeast Ohio. New to the area, I busted out these books and said, oh, I'll do some investigating. And that's when I discovered the Headless Motorcyclist of Elmore. For more on one of my favorite paranormal stories, the following clip was taken from Tanya Schauwecker on YouTube.
A long time ago in Elmore, Ohio, not too far from here, the legend of the Headless Ghost Rider began. According to many, the legend is absolutely true and goes something like this. Back during World War I, a young man and woman were devastated to hear that the man was drafted and would soon ship off to the front lines. The couple said their goodbyes, promising each other that their love would endure the miles apart. The soldier kissed and hugged her goodbye and left for more than 3 long years. The young soldier endured relentless battles against the enemy. He held his best friend in his arms after their entire platoon was ambushed, and they were the only survivors. After completing his tour, the young soldier was honorably discharged and made his way back to Elmore. He bought a new motorcycle and took off to surprise his love, believing that she would still be waiting to become his bride, even though they had no communication for 3 years. When the soldier arrived at the old farmhouse, he walked up on the porch and looked through the window. Instead of finding her waiting for him, he found her in the arms of another man. Distraught and devastated, the soldier tore down the long gravel driveway. He rounded the corner at a high rate of speed and lost control as he crossed Mud Creek Bridge. The motorcycle careened over the side of the bridge, killing the soldier instantly. When the authorities arrived, they found his body and the motorcycle torn to pieces, including the soldier's decapitated head. Years later, the only remaining piece of the old farmhouse is an overgrown lane, but the Headless Ghost Rider continues to visit his love on the same day every year, his tortured soul reliving the night his heart was broken for eternity. On March 21st, if you go to Mud Creek Bridge in Elmore, park your car on the bridge, flash your lights 3 times, and honk your horn 3 times, the light of the Headless Ghost Rider will again fly down the old drive, round the corner, and disappear on the bridge. Do this with caution, though. Those who have experienced it have never been the same. Some say that the soldier isn't particularly kind to young men who come to see his beloved.
Of course, you can find a link to that video in the show notes for tonight's episode. Naturally, on March 21st, in several years while I was in school, I made the trek to Elmore, which was maybe 20 minutes from school. Each time I left highly disappointed. Unfortunately, it seemed, the motorcyclist took those days off. Of course, that doesn't keep me from thoroughly enjoying this story. Thank you again, Frankie, for taking the time to share yours. And I highly recommend you check out the Haunted Ohio series, even if you're not from Ohio. There's tons of great stories included in that book series. All right, for our next call, we're headed back to the Pacific Northwest. The following comes to us from Dan in the state of Oregon.
Hey, Derek and Monsters listeners. This is Dan from Oregon again. And even though I losing my voice, I wanted to call in because I just heard a segment on Season 7, Episode 2, after finally catching up with all of the middle episodes. Anyway, a caller related a story about, I think he said it was his great-grandfather, who was a very hateful man, and they tried to get him to repent and come to the Lord before he died, and he refused and said something about, it's time for me to go with that old dog or something like that. Heard barking outside, saw the dog outside, and then he died right when they saw the dog. And you said that came up, Derek. You said that came brought up something in your mind, and it definitely brought up something in my mind as well. A story from when I was growing up. A very respected, larger local ranch-owning family told this story a lot, and one of the younger sons was really close friends with my stepdad, and the whole family told this story, but he told this story a lot. Anyway, his grandfather and grandmother apparently were very, very close, soulmate sort of people, and she passed away before him, which, as we know, is the more rare of the situations when it comes to relationships, the woman dying before the man. Quite sad. And anyway, her request was to have her body cremated, so they did that. And at the reception afterwards, celebration of life, whatever you want to call it, as the families gathered around him, essentially he said, everybody's always known that I can't live without this woman, and basically, I love you all and goodbye. And he opened the urn, dumped the ashes over the top of his head, and died on the spot. Like I said, the whole family told that story forever and ever, and it might seem sad because of death or whatever, but I wanted to share it because I always thought it was one of the most beautiful stories I've ever heard. Keep up the good work, everybody, and hopefully all of us find that kind of love someday. Take care.
Thank you, Dan. I agree. That is beautiful. It's also intriguing. I can't help but wonder, how did the man die on cue? Do we have that ability? Is that something that we're each ingrained with? The ability to know when it's time and simply flip that switch. And there's also something to be said about a broken heart. Anyone that's familiar with the history of tragedy, shipwrecks, disease, famine, that sort of thing, they can all quickly tell you that the number of people that have died of a said broken heart is quite high. And as tragic as that may be, as Dan said, there's something beautiful and peaceful about it. So thank you, Dan, for taking the time to share that not so much scary, but certainly intriguing story. All right, folks, it's that time of the evening. I'm going to hit up a few announcements. For you Patreon supporters, this weekend is your lucky weekend. The Paranormal News of April episode will be dropping most likely Sunday evening, so keep an eye out for that. And if you're not a Patreon subscriber, simply visit www.patreon.com and search for Monsters Among Us podcast. A $4 monthly pledge gets you access to not only 2 new episodes a month, but all the back catalog as well. And a huge thank you to all those that have already contributed. As I teased last week, the new t-shirt design is about a week away from unveiling. I'm getting everything locked down and getting ready to place that order. So if you're looking for some new t-shirts, now's a good time. And for those of you that have been asking me about the Mirrored Men shirts, those will be coming back as well. Probably at the end of this month, I'll be placing that order. And of course, I am still working on the sweatshirt pre-order. If you have a story to share, please call the hotline at 1-888-608-NIGHT. That's 1-888-608-6444. And keep in mind, I'm now accepting Hometown Legend submissions for the Season 7 finale. So if you have one of those to submit, now is a great time. And if you could, please mention early on in the call that this is for the Hometown Legend segment. That way it makes it a lot easier for me to pull those calls from the hundreds that I receive monthly. And the last thing I'd like to touch on is I've received a handful of emails over the past couple weeks about whispering voices in the background of the show. I am aware of this, and it is part of the background music by Coag Music that I use. From time to time, he seems to sprinkle in some I guess creepy whispers and stuff like that. It's extremely effective, but a lot of people have caught it, and I'll say it's very observant of you guys to have caught that. But that's what it is. It's simply background music. Now, I do my best to try to cut that out, but the show is an hour long, and sometimes I miss a clip or two here and there. So, my apologies, but if you hear anything strange in the background, it's most likely part of the background music. Alright, what do you guys say we get into the back end of this? To kick that off, our first call comes to us from the state of Illinois. The following is Raphael's call.
Hey Derek, how you doing? This is Raphael from Chicago. I love your podcast, man. Keep it up. I'm a Lyft driver and my passengers love it. Anyways, I wanted to call you, tell you the story that happened to me and a friend. I grew up in Puerto Rico in the Caribbean. Me and my friend from high school used to go surfing all the time. We used to get up at 3 in the morning, drive to the other side of the island, surf for an hour or two, and then drive back into the city, make it in time for school. So this one morning, we stayed up all night, and we left at 3 a.m. to the other side of the island. And we got there a little bit early. And we're driving up to this secluded beach that is part of an abandoned Air Force base. And we get there right before sunrise. So because neither of us felt very comfortable surfing in the dark, we decided to wait a few minutes for the sun to come up, and then we would paddle out into the water. We were parked on one of the ends of a half-moon bay and a bluff overlooking the bay. Now, there was no moon that night. It was very dark. And as we're waiting there for the sun to come up, I gotta confess, we lit up a joint, and we're smoking. But as soon as we lit up the joint, this huge light, the size of maybe 4 or 5 full moons, this thing was huge, suddenly lit up and illuminated the entire Half Moon Bay, which was probably like half a mile. It started at the far end of the Half Moon Bay. It hovered over the bay up until it came right above us. And when it was right above us, that's when I could tell how really incredibly big this thing was. It stayed there for like 2 seconds, completely quietly, silently, no noise, no anything. It illuminated us for a couple of minutes, and then it turned off. Poof! And it was gone. And the stars came back out. And it was freaky and creepy like nothing. Me and my friend were speechless. And granted, we had just driven almost 2 hours to the other side of the island. We look at each other. We turned the joint off. We had barely smoked a couple of drags each. And without saying a word, we pulled out and drove the 2 hours back to San Juan without surfing that day. That's how freaked out we were. Now, a comment I would like to add is this thing was huge. I mean, this thing was enormous, and it did not make a single sound. And it irradiated such a luminous light that it lit up the entire beach. It was like having not sun out, but it was so bright out. It just freaked us out. Anyways, I have a couple of other stories and different things that you cover, different themes that you cover in your show, and I might call back and tell you some of them. But this being my one UFO story that I can honestly say I can't explain it any other way, but something that was not man-made. I mean, and remember, I forgot to tell you, I'm almost 50 years old. This was in 1986. Now, back then, it didn't seem like anything that was possible with the technology we had back then, especially because it was so quiet and it was so huge. Anyways, that's my story. I hope you can use it. Keep up the good work, my man. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Raphael. And thank you so much for sharing the show with your passengers. I can only imagine what they think when they unexpectedly hear some of these phone calls. And also, Raphael, you called in with a footprint story a few weeks back. Incredible story, but unfortunately, it was cut off. So if you could resubmit that story, I'd love to play it on the air. Thank you for submitting that, and I gotta say, you're right. 1986, Puerto Rico, it does lend a little clout to this UFO sighting. It certainly wasn't a drone or anything like that. Thank you again, Raphael, for taking the time. And while we're on the subject of failed submissions, a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago at this point, I had mentioned that a call I received from the state of Arkansas was too distorted to use on the air. So I implored the caller to call back in. Well, lucky us, Mark did just that. The following story, one that's quickly becoming one of my favorites, comes to us from the state of Arkansas. And the following is Mark's tale.
Yeah, this is Mark from Arkansas. I was calling you back. I'm the one that had the story on the old car and the boxer dogs. Basically, what had happened is I'd found this old car. It was a '69 Continental that I just had to have, and I got it off of a guy or a family, rather, that kind of had a checkered past. And anyways, I turned it into a winter project, just something to do, get out in the garage and work on. And at that time, I had two boxers, a male and a female. And kind of how our garage and everything is set up is we've had a back door going out into a patio, and the garage set off to the left about 12, 15 feet. One night, I went to go outside and just tinker around on that old car, and the dogs always would go out with me, but on this occasion, they just so happened to come out the door first, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something, just a shadow of something. It had to have been big and tall. I don't know, but it was running across the backside of my garage. And so I thought, well, somebody's trying to break into my garage, And I took off running at it, but the dogs already had seen it too, and they had beat me by at least 10 foot and were chasing this shadow around the corner. Now, to kind of give you a layout, we had about a half-acre yard and had a 4-foot-tall chain-link fence going all the way around it. And I couldn't have been more than 1 or 2 seconds behind the shadow, and the dogs were right on it. And when I rounded the corner of that garage, I was expecting to see somebody jumping the fence or something, and I didn't see a thing. There wasn't nothing flying off in the air. There wasn't nothing crossing the fence. Well, the dogs were in the corner looking out towards the road in front of our house. So I just popped the gate and thought, well, they'll go chase whoever it is. Well, the dogs they wouldn't leave the yard. They just kept smelling the air and the ground, and their hair was all bristled up, and they were growling. And I don't know if you know much about boxers, but they're super friendly. But whatever this was, had them acting really aggressive and protective. And to kind of back this story up, I'd had this car in that garage for 3 or 4 months. And every time well, not every time, but sometimes when I was out there at night working on this thing in the garage, I always kind of felt like there was somebody watching me or something. It just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But anyways, not long after that, I got rid of the car, and I hadn't had anything happen since. But on a side note,
I am a Christian, so I won't get on a religious rant, but I do believe this evil stuff is out there, and whether you believe or not, I hate to hear people getting afraid of seeing something, but I just dare anybody, if they see something like that scary, just call out the name of Jesus and watch what happens. But I love your show. Thanks for letting me tell my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for retelling your story. Now, I don't know what it is about this particular tale, but I love it. There's not even a lot that takes place here. Mark saw something. Mark and his dogs chased something. He had some odd feelings. But there's just something visceral about it. You know, it may be because it seems to be attached to a vehicle. And I can't speak for the rest of the world, but most of the listeners here in the U.S. that are of age has a vehicle. Has something that they drive every single day. Something that becomes part of them for hours at a time. And I think it's that connection that puts this story above a lot of others, for me at least. Because unlike a haunted house, a vehicle is something that moves around and exchanges hands quite quickly, quite often. Perhaps past memories of the Stephen King film Christine also play into my enjoyment of this particular story. Whatever it is, it certainly seems to hit home. So thank you again, Mark, for taking the time to share it. Our next call of the evening takes us back to the state of New Hampshire. The following comes to us from Tamiko.
Hi, my name is Tamiko, and I'm calling from North Carolina. I listen to your podcast at work. It helps me get through my day. I binge all day on it. I was calling because I used to work for a Christian organization, which was basically, it was a church. I worked for a church. And we had a funeral. I was the secretary there, and there was a funeral we had for a young man earlier that day. So the church had cleared out, and nobody was there but me, and my office was basically located in the fellowship hall. So as I'm sitting there and the day is going on, I hear the fire doors that lead to upstairs open and close. Now, mind you, these doors are very heavy because they're fire doors. And the doors open and close. I know no one else is in there, so I wait and I listen a little longer, and I hear a chair from the dining room, the dining table that's in the fellowship hall, chair slides out like somebody pulls a chair out. There's no one in the building but myself. So I get up and I walk out of the office and I look, and the chair is turned facing directly the direction of the office. And I was taken aback because, like I said, we had just had a funeral for a 6-year-old boy. And it scared me. So needless to say, I got up, got my bags, I left, and I exit the building. And I told one of my grandparents, and they were like, when something like that happens and it's a spirit, you're supposed to tell them to go to the light. I didn't have time to tell them to go to the light. I just grabbed my bags and I went to the door. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you, Tamiko. Now, unfortunately, I've attended several funerals of younger people, and some of those rather recently. And I can tell you that the energy in the room during the services, the viewing, basically all the events that take place in a traditional funeral, the energy is quite high, and it's draining, to be quite honest. A few hours in that room feels like a month. So the point I'm getting at here is that with all that energy and with all that expelled energy, I wonder if it somehow becomes trapped in the room and manifests itself in moving objects or making sounds. Now, this theory is a bit troublesome because there seems to be some intelligence behind the moving of the furniture and the placement of the chairs. But as any paranormal investigator will tell you, all we can do is make educated guesses at this point, because we certainly don't have anything definitive to go off of. Thank you again, Tamiko, for sharing your story, and I gotta say, I certainly don't blame you for wanting to leave the building. All right, folks, This is it. Final call of the evening. The following comes to us anonymously from the state of Colorado.
Hey, love the podcast. I actually just found it. I'm starting from the very first season, making my way up. I'm in season 4 now. Wanted to share a story that happened to me when I was in the military. I'll say probably around 2007 or 8, maybe. I was a Air Force sergeant, military police station in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I worked the mid shift, which was usually anywhere between 5 in the evening until 5 in the morning. I was in charge of maybe about 13 other guys. And it was pretty typical for us once we got on shift to kind of drive around, find a place to park, eat, scan the radios, do whatever we're supposed to do for that night. So on this particular night, I was by myself. I drove down the main road. Was sitting on top of a helicopter pad by myself, just looking out over the city. It may have been around 1 o'clock at night. I wasn't sleepy. I knew where all of my guys were at on our base, so pretty sure nobody was able to play any crazy tricks on me that night. It's really weird now that I think about it. I had decided to get out and take a piss on the other side of the truck. And when I got out, everything seemed normal. Nothing out of place. Since it was, that late at night, there weren't really any cars coming or going from the base, or weren't any really driving on the highway out in front of the base. So I get ready to relieve myself. Something tells me in my mind, I guess you can say, to turn around. Now, keeping in mind, the helo pad was kind of on top of a hill. So at the very top of this hill, it was almost cut in half, and it was just a cement slab. You walk to the edge of this slab, and it starts to grade down towards flat ground. So as soon as I turn around, it appears to be something crawling up the hill. Being where the base was located, it was put up right up against a mountain range. The base itself is inside of a mountain. The base is called NORAD. Like I said, being where it is, there's always reports of bear and mountain lions and skunk, turkey. So I was pretty much familiar with all the types of animals that I could possibly see. But what I saw was nothing of the sort. As soon as I turned around, I looked down towards the ground where it was sloping uphill to the helo pad, and it was, I don't know, the closest thing that I can compare it to give you some kind of visualization is like a emaciated, skinny zombie almost, as crazy as it sounds. And it was solid white. I maybe saw it for, I don't know, 5 seconds. So as soon as my mind registered what it was just instant fright. And for those quick 5 seconds that I saw it, I honestly thought about pulling my sidearm and shooting it. But for whatever reason, I was too afraid. Regardless of what position I held, it was pure instinct, get back in the vehicle and drive away. But back to the description, its arms, as it was crawling up the hill, they looked like they were, the elbows at least, were high above the head. And it was almost, his head was close to the ground. So it was kind of like he was crouching down, looking at me, and stalking me, I guess you could say. Because in the beginning, my back was towards it. And for whatever reason, something told me to turn around, and that's when I saw it. As soon as I saw it, like I said, I jumped back in my vehicle, spun out, drove away, drove maybe half a mile up the hill to where I could see the helo pad. Sat there in pure disbelief. I was looking down at the helipad with night vision goggles, whatever, my regular eyes, couldn't see nothing. Met up with one of my other patrols, did not tell them what had happened, and this was a two-man patrol, and the leader of that patrol, just for no apparent reason, had asked me if I was just down at the lower helipad. I told him that I was, and he had proceeded to tell me that they were parked there, exact same spot, maybe a little bit after or a little before I was there, and said they were just sitting there doing just like I was doing, looking over the helipad, looking at the city lights, and they both saw something white in the rearview mirror run from behind their vehicle. They said they got freaked out. They didn't bother to get out the vehicle to check out what it was, but it was big enough that they could see it sitting in I think it might have been a Ford Explorer, a white Ford Explorer. That was our patrol vehicles. It was big enough to where they could see that run past their rear end of the car in their rearview mirrors. Once they told me that, then that's when I proceeded to let them know about what I had seen. I think for the rest of the night, we were all pretty freaked out because our stories kind of matched with what we each saw without either one of us knowing the other story beforehand. And after that situation, after that occasion, I think the next day we had a base-wide exercise. It's just where the leadership of the base, they run scenarios on us. I had told one of my superiors what had happened, and of course, some of the guys, some of the older ranked members of the military, they really don't believe in that type of stuff. But we all kind of laughed at it. Well, they kind of laughed at it, and I told them flat out, I'm not going back down to the lower helipad. So it was too crazy of a situation. Never seen nothing like that. There was no way it was a mountain lion